Literary Societies by Claire Collins. So, what is a literary society? Well, it's not a book club. One of the first things that I really enjoyed learning about literary societies was that they are a field for critical thinking, academic debate, developing oration skills. It's really a place for people to come together to think critically. Literature is, of course, involved in this process, but it wasn't the main focus. They were completely open access, meaning it didn't cost anything to be a member of a literary society. You basically just had to be a member of the university that was involved with this literary society, and you could be a member of it. You also had to bring to the table critical thinking skills and a willingness to learn. One of the really neat things that literary societies had going for them were enormous libraries. I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a second, but this is something that got me really excited. Also, they were precursors to public administration type degrees, and I'm going to talk a little bit about the types of people that were attracted to literary societies. So, what were literary societies all about? They were all about critical thinking. Okay, so debate, oration, discussing political ideas, literary review. But really, the thing that I thought was most interesting about it was that these young men collected and protected rare manuscripts. It didn't have to necessarily be rare. I'm sure that we would consider them rare now. However, what they would do is they would basically protect knowledge. These young men would collect novels. They would collect encyclopedias. They would collect, textbooks and things like that to really have a base source of knowledge within their society. One of the real shames about the eventual downfall of the literary society is that this isn't something that's necessarily encouraged in higher education anymore, that an outside group would start its own source of knowledge. I think the internet age has really affected the way that we capture knowledge and hold on to it. But I love the idea that these young men would come together and they would protect knowledge and that they actively wanted to be engaged in learning. Another thing that they were really kind of all about was the study of Latin and Greek literature, especially the things that most influence modern day perspectives. So if you really think back to those classic pieces of Latin and Greek literature that are still affecting literature today, those are the same things that these young men were discussing. Now, how it impacts higher education today. So earlier I mentioned that there were a lot of people who were interested in public administration type jobs associated with these literary societies. You're talking about people like Henry Wadsworth Longfellow, George Washington. These societies got started at some of the premier institutions across the United States, and most of them were started at institutions that are still around today, like Yale, Harvard, Penn. These are names we hear all the time. Now, the Literary Society did die out, and it started to die out around the time of the Civil War. And they started being replaced by what I guess you would call parts of literary society. So we would see debate teams start popping up, public administration as a course of study, societies completely devoted to literary review. I was a member of a society that all we did was review literature and think about it critically. I loved that in college, and that all stems from literary societies. It's also the precursor to all modern Greek life. That is something that I find really interesting. Now, in literary societies, generally speaking, they got their names from the Latin alphabet. They were very heavily influenced by anything having to do with Latin oration skills and Latin literature. And Greek life, modern Greek life, is an offshoot of that passion. Now, like I said, literary societies did dissolve towards the end of the 19th century, and one of the real shames is that their libraries were absorbed by their affiliated universities. So some of that knowledge that they had gained and striven to protect isn't around anymore, but it is still present at their universities. Here are the references used for this material. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about literary societies.